Hello everyone. Just a couple of things that I want to point out that will make more sense a little bit later in the video. This is what I use for the grounding wire. It's basically just 6 gauge solid copper, and it is what we use for that. Another thing that I want to do, I'm getting ready to go up on the roof, but I've got a bubble level here, and I want to make sure that I have it fully calibrated. Okay, so now it's showing 0. Okay, it is a beautiful fall day here in East Central Illinois, and we are going to go up and look at the solar panels, and I have various things that I want to talk about related to that. You can see right now that we have 6 sets of panels. Each set consists of 2 of the panels, and we've got a little bit of room on the end. That is where the 7th set of panels should be, but because it arrived via FedEx broke, I don't have those up yet. But let's go up and take a look. So I have various things that I want to point out. One of the first things is this little app called the Sun's Path, and it's pretty cool. What you can do, if you hold it up like this, I don't know how well you can see that, but it actually switches into an AR mode, and like this, it actually tells you where the sun is going to be at any given time. And it also has the winter time, so that's going to be the lowest that the sun's going to be. And then if you go farther up, you can see that it also has the summertime. So it's got today's sun path, it's got the winter sun path and the summer sun path. And this is actually incredibly convenient for figuring out what sort of sun that your panels are going to have at any given location on the roof. You can see that right here we're in the sun, but you can see over there on that side it's in the shade because of this big tree right here. And this little app right here is actually quite helpful for that. So be aware of those 2 things. A few other things. If we look at, I do apologize for the wind, I'm sure that it's very loud. If we run the bubble level and we look at the angle of the roof, you can see that it's at about 22.5 degrees. If you figure out the optimal angle for what you want your solar panels to be, the way that you calculate that, if you're pretty close to the equator, if your latitude is less than 25 degrees, you're supposed to use your latitude times 0.87. And if your latitude is between 25 and 50, you should really use your latitude times 0.76 plus 3.1 degrees. Because we're at 40 degrees latitude, that basically means that we need to be at 33.5. So if I look at, if we just matched it up with the roof, we'd be at 22.4. But that's why I have built in additional height on the upper side of the panel, which is putting me, that right there is showing 33, so that gets me pretty close. It's not completely perfect, but it gets me pretty close. So I wanted to be sure to point that out. Now let's take a closer look at these solar panels. These on the end right here were the very first ones to go in, and if you remember from some of the earlier videos, as we look through on the back side, you can see that this is kind of look that we've got going on here. If you remember from some of the earlier videos, we actually had some pretty intense sagging that was occurring in the center of the span on this beam right here. And so what I've actually done is I've actually gone in and I have added a piece of angle aluminum. I've already collected some leaves in there, so I apologize for that. And this piece of angle aluminum is about, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe, I think it's 8 feet long actually. And I'm using it to keep this bottom rail from sagging the way that it had been. And so that has actually helped out quite a bit. Now, if you look at the additional mounts that are on down through there, whenever I added the mounts, I actually put them closer together to help prevent having issues with that. A couple of other things that I'll point out. You can see that this first set of panels has a microinverter but no battery commanders. The rest of them actually have battery commanders. Or I mean, I'm sorry, yeah, battery commanders. Interestingly enough, you can see that it looks like one of the microinverters down there is actually hanging down a little bit. So I need to look into exactly why that's doing that, because that should not be hanging down. So anyway, the prescribed distance between the easy mounts is supposed to be, I think, 105 inches or so, and that's what we had on this first one. On the additional rails, so I have 3 sets of rails. So the first set of rails is basically right here, and that one we have the full 105 inches. But for the additional 2 sets of rails, I actually got 3 of the easy mounts, and that lets me put them quite a bit closer together, and so that is actually helping with that. You can see right here I've got this microinverter. Looks like it's just bent down a little bit. I don't know exactly when that happened, but nothing's wrong with that or anything. You can get a little bit better feel for how all this is wired together. It's done just exactly like the how-to videos on the Legion Solar site. We have the battery commanders down at the bottom, and then we have the microinverters higher up. And then the microinverters are connected through this T cable, and they go down through there to the vent that I'll talk about in a bit. And that's just kind of how that's set up. And the lower side is the battery commanders, and the battery commanders, you can see the red and the black cable there. That's going from each one of those also over to the vent, and so that's all of that is set up. Now let's talk a little bit more about that vent. So what I ended up doing is I ended up getting a pretty typical air vent, and here you can see it from the upside obviously, and I actually put that vent in underneath where I was planning to put some of the panels. And then excuse me, my intention after that is to put all the battery commanders as close to this vent as possible so that we can keep the cable runs as short as possible. And then the panels on the very end, way back there, I have 2 sets of microinverter only panels, and the rest of them all have battery commanders. And so the microinverter panels are going to be on the very ends. Right now though, since we have the broken panel, I currently have 6 sets of panels and I have 5 battery commanders. So I decided to just put the one on the very end as a microinverter only, and the rest of them all have their battery commanders. Now the other thing that you'll notice, if you look at the positioning of the microinverters and the battery commanders and the panels, on these panels down here, this is the very east end that you're looking at, we have the blank panel, and then we have the panel that has the hardware, the microinverters and the battery commanders on it. And then we have the next blank panel, and so on. If you look right there, we've got a blank panel, then we've got the microinverter, and we've got a blank panel, microinverter, blank panel, microinverter, blank, hardware, blank, hardware. But you'll note that then I switched. So we have the hardware here, and then we have the blank one. And all that has to do with the vent location. What I wanted to do for actually getting the power in, we have these T-harnesses right here that are coming through this. What I did for this T-harness is I actually attached the 4-foot extension to the T-harness, which let me get the extension into the attic. But then for the panels that are going to go down through here on the west side, I have the T-harness attached to the microinverter that's right here next to the vent, and then the long portion of the T-harness, for this T-harness over here, then goes into the vent and into the attic. And the attic battery video actually shows what's going to happen, or what happens on the other end of that. If we look at this in here, you can see that I've already plugged in the T-harness that's going to go to the next set of panels. And the reason that I did that is that it's just really kind of a pain to screw it in to the existing T-harness if the panels are here. So I have that ready to go, and the next panel that's going to have the hardware on it will be right here, and then the empty panel will be right down here. And so that's how all of that is going to work. Now, here's another view of the vent. And one thing that I want to point out right down there, if you look right there, you can see that that is actually the grounding mount. Whenever you get the rail system, they will throw a grounding mount on there, and you need to do that so that the entire structure of all of the solar panels and everything is actually grounded the way it should be. So you get that little piece right there in the very center that screws into the rails, and you screw that down nice and tight, and then you attach the grounding cable to that. That grounding cable goes through the vent into the attic, and I have it attached to a water pipe in there that gives it grounding to the ground. Probably not quite as good as it could be, but that's what I've done with that. Now, whenever I was doing all of the calculations, let me zoom that back out. Whenever I was doing all the calculations, I actually calculated slightly incorrectly on how long these rails were going to be. And so if you do the math from how much space we have from there to the end of this rail, you don't quite get the 56 or 57 inches or so that you need. So what I have done in preparation for the final set of panels that's going to go on here is I have cut a piece of angle aluminum, and I just have it set up so that I can attach this nice and tight whenever I get around to it. Cut a groove in the end here. The little end piece that you see right there will actually slide in to this, and then I can just move this guy in and out to position it where I need to, tighten these screws up nice and tight, and that should let me not need to buy another set of rails for this right now. And so I did that on the top side and the bottom side. And so that will take care of that. If you look up underneath here, I don't know if you're going to be able to see anything. No, you really can't see anything at all other than the rail itself. So that's not very useful. As far as keeping the things clean and dirty, or clean versus dirty, they do tend to attract some dust, I must say. We've had really cloudy conditions for the last couple of weeks since I actually got these things installed, and so I haven't had a really good time to determine exactly how well that they're doing, sadly enough, but I will be following that up later on. So that is the setup outside, and I hope that you found this helpful. I know this was a little bit longer video than normal, but I had quite a bit that I wanted to talk about for that. And stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't, and all that. And we've got a lot more to talk about with this the broken panel and how that's been going with FedEx and Legion Solar, and just how everything's working. And again, it's just another beautiful day, and hopefully as soon as that tree loses its leaves, we'll be able to get more sun on these guys up here. And thank you for listening.